Picking up a corner of an update from last week, wherein I was mentioning that it is preferable to do anything specifically other than to drift along and be you. It also will sneak up on everyone here. Most of it's snuck up on to some degree already, that you can in fact undergo a certain kind of change. Even in a limited individual way, it's as though your own merry-go-round can make one revolution and you can be raised up a notch. But all it takes is a short while, and what was new becomes custom. What was strange becomes habit, and you're suddenly drifting along. And for the sake of simplicity, let's say it's a new you, and you simply now drift along and you become the new you. Based upon some of your laughter just then, I assume that you see that that won't get it. You can certainly say, well, hey, I'm better off than I was a year ago, 2 years ago. That may be true. But now I could also say, well, now you're just worse off on a different level. It is a constant problem. I would suggest to you that's even one reason that famous line, or that line has become famous, from Alice Through the Looking Glass, of the Queen or whoever it was, talking about you got to run faster here just to stay in place, and you got to run unbelievably faster to ever get anywhere. And I see that reprinted all the way from fortune cookies to the backs of cereal boxes. And as always, I suggest to you, if something becomes a maxim or a truism, no matter how flaccid and silly it may appear on the surface, it's a reflection of something quite real, and that's what it's a reflection of. That boy had a great victory yesterday, last month, a year ago. So what? Because I can assure you it's not going to last. You simply are sliding back being you in a different way, on a different level, if that makes you feel better. But picking up one of the corners that I meant to of this updating, when I was mentioning it was better to do anything, and I said, for instance, walk into a store, and instead of just drifting along, as you can do, running on two-dimensional consciousness, instead of doing that, go into the store and specifically intend to be Mr. or Mrs. Happy Person. But now let me point out a little further with that. In the attempt to be specific, if at first you can't fully see yourself as a verb, which everybody is, but if you cannot fully see it that way, at least you should be striving to be an adjective as opposed to a noun. You should strive to be an adjective as opposed to a to the tune of howdy doody, let's all sing, it's now an acronym time. That everybody, instead of, that you should strive to be an adjective rather than a I don't know how you pronounce it, sopping. That at the very least you should strive to be an adjective as opposed to a stolid old pettifogging noun. That is, in this case, now listen, this does point to something. In the attempt to specifically act as though you are Mr. or Mrs. Happy Person, the emphasis should be on the happy, not the person. Not that I'm going in and be Mr. Happy Man or I'm going to be Mr. Happy Woman. The emphasis should be on the happy, on the living flow of the happy. Not the man, not the woman. Not even, as some of your own unwashed masses inside of your own state may tell you, that happy man or happy woman would be one term. It's not. The emphasis where you should be looking would be on the happy. You should be striving to be an adjective. If you can't be a verb, at least be an adjective. But you should not be a noun. Slip-sliding along being you, apparently, is always the world of the noun. You should not be calling yourself internally man or woman, Mr. or Mrs. You should not be calling yourself anything. But do not confuse and try to run together a whole term of happy man, concerned woman, the emphasis should be on the adjective. That is closer to the verbal reality of you being a verb than that. I guess some of you would be shocked to find out that you are pettifogging, but that's your problem. You could say it's a trivial matter anyway. Now for some more stretchings of maps. In one sense, no matter what you believe, no matter how you look at it, everybody does see their own life as it is. And I'm talking about everybody. I'm not talking about a few people involved with this. Everybody does see their life as it is. They just cannot describe it, and they cannot bear to explain it to anyone, including themselves. Now, this prevailing historical idea of no less self, its corollaries, such as a metaphysical experience, a closer relationship to great cosmic forces and guides in some way, would make a person's true inner secret hidden self unfold, and that you would peer down into yourself, however you do that, and there you would be. As always, I suggest that life has put a certain spin on this. It has, if for nothing else, given a non-ending supply of illusionary hobbies. It helps keep things stirred up. People all the way from would-be mystics to psychologists, philosophers, continue to point out the difficulty in doing this, if not the impossibility. But looked at from a three-dimensional viewpoint, at the very best, I tell you again, it's not a problem of it cannot be done. I'm telling you that from a particular view, it is done. That everybody on this planet, everyone here, in a certain sense, sees their life as it is, but they can't describe it. Thusly, they talk a lot. If you were more of a simpleton, if you were more of a simplistic would-be psychologist, I guess, then you could say, all right, if there's any validity in what you just said, then the extensive talk would be some form of, what do they call it? Overcompensation. You can call it anything you want to. It's the molecules back in action. But people do, from a certain view, have a very good sense of their life as it is, but they can't describe it, and they can't explain it to anyone. Hence, everyone tries. That's not the reason why I say hence. I guess that's a fairly acceptable sentence, but it's, as always, it is a reflection, it is a disjointed piece of the full reality of it. Along with that, I would like to clear up something else. Wouldn't you? I would like to attempt to help you clear up something else, and that is that there are no such things as misconceptions. There are simply conceptions that you don't agree with. Misconceptions might as well be looked at as being the brother-in-law of unicorns. There's no such thing. People can describe unicorns the same way I can describe flying pigs, but they don't exist. You can describe a misconception, but they don't exist. All that exists are conceptions that you're not wired up to agree with. In the middle of these last two, and we're going to get in the middle in a minute, but it's something else. I would like to bring you an update. Ordinarily, people live out their life in such a way, ordinary people, that it seems to them that their life is little more than a continuing matter of crisis control. Whereas a real revolutionist would understand that his duty is to create crisis. If any of you have any doubt, any suspicion that what I opened up tonight's commentaries with might apply to you, that is, maybe you are now in some relatively new position and now you've got bogged down there. That possibility, among others, can be tested if you feel as though, to whatever degree and whatever manner, that right now I'm involved or there's a continuing situation wherein I seem to be involved in crisis control. If you feel like that, you're in a place I'm going to describe a little more specifically shortly. You can't control that kind of crisis any more than an ordinary person can stop their, quote, problems, any more than ordinary people can quit, quote, suffering. At the ordinary level of consciousness, the only way anybody can quit suffering would be to die. I guess we could say that to ordinary people, that life is a continuing series of looking for treatments, prescriptions. But if that be true, then to the ordinary person, then death would have to be the ultimate cure. But between here and there, ordinary people cannot stop being irritated. They cannot stop the feeling that there is a continuing series of crises. It does not require that we try and perceive or examine the magnitude of their crises. As long as to you, as long as to the individual, that this is nothing but a series of continuing crises. It may be small ones, but this is what I am confronted with, and no sooner do I stamp out one little brush fire than one springs up behind me. If you have any doubt as to whether you have made any great progress, and if you have, whether you are stuck, if you have any doubt whether you're still normal, if you feel as though you're surrounded by brush fires, dial 911 and be prepared for the worst. But on the other hand, there's a way in which a real revolutionist, in a sense, would bypass, would escape from, would transcend the ordinary crises, and he would specifically create crises. That is an escape. Anytime you do anything specifically, it is a means of escaping that which would have happened anyway. If you're attempting to specifically act as though you're Mr. Happy Man or Mrs. Concerned Woman, you are attempting to escape simply being you. That's why I insisted verbally that it does not matter what you do. You should not do anything. You should not be playing around with negative emotions as you specifically try to do something. All of you should know by now that it is dangerous for you to try and play, instead of just be yourself, to play Mr. Mad Person, Mr. Angry Person. You can start out playing it, but it's like you start out playing the guitar, and by the time you can get to the second bar of the song, the guitar has got you over its knee and it's playing you. If you like that picturization, instead of guitar, think tuba. And think that the tuba got you upside down. So do not do that as you specifically try to do something. But it is taking that kind of extreme approach that can overcome immediately First off, you can look at it as it immediately interferes with. And then once you get strong enough not to get strangled by it, you can stay upright and you can keep oriented. You conflict with whatever it was you would have naturally done. You conflict with whatever would have been naturally you. And then after you have been able to conflict it, to confront it, to interfere with it, then you can create a kind of crisis that keeps it off balance, willfully. There is a difference in being irritated and agitated by being alive and irritating yourself. I didn't do that very dramatically, but there is all the difference in your world. To irritate yourself is no irritation. To make yourself mad is nothing. It's funny. To do a willful act on your own doesn't require any effort. As some of you have found out, and most of you have managed to forget from time to time, in fact, doing such as that appears to, at the ordinary level, give one new energy by being a what? Fraud. Thank you. Fraud was the very word I was looking for. Specifically, though, at least I remind you, even if you don't see it yet, there is no such thing as a mechanical fraud. There is no such thing as accidentally lying. There's no way that an ordinary person can be a, what? Sham. How can you be a sham? How can you be a pseudo-fake? And that's exactly one of the small twists that life has done to man. I'm not going into that any further, but as always, you could ask yourself, in what way and for what purpose has life used that? That it has something that life has internalized with itself, some thoughts of action that life has had that has now manifested itself in man's own actions, such as the belief in lying, subterfuge, that some men are fakes, that you can be a sham. And all you've got to, if any of you don't have any real suspicion of that, if that does not strike some little vibratory string in your guitar that makes it go, yeah, that's true, even if you can't explain it, then shame on you by now. But at any rate, it is a fact. But why is it that everyone believes that people can be fakes? If you know anything about one thing, let's say you, if you know anything about what you are, then you know that's just all a grand illusion, that you cannot be a fake. People do not accidentally become fakes. It takes exceptional people to become fakes. How can you be a sham? Sham. Once you see what, and I say what, not who, but once you see what ordinary humanity is, once you see what ordinary consciousness is, then to have some idea of some people are shams or some people could be a fake, then you got to believe that we're way beyond such kindergarten areas as redundancy. We moved up to artistic levels, such as that great painter Salvador poop grabber. It would be the same way as someone going out to a dung heap and begin to paint it brown. To know you just as you are, and then, if this was possible, to know something and then absolutely forget it, and then to look around at somebody else and think, what a phony. There's no such thing. The only thing that could be a phony would be a phony. People simply drift along and they are what they are. You are what you are if you're ordinary. And it may be that part of what you are is believing, as many people do, that, people can fake you off. Well, why is it that no one believes that it's possible that they can do it? You always believe you got to watch it. You got to be prepared for trouble. I'm not the sort to deal in trouble. I wouldn't lie to anybody. But I do not represent the majority of humanity. Most people would lie to you in the drop of a what? They will. You got to watch it. Not me. People will fool you. People will say things to your face that they don't mean, but not me. I couldn't do it if I wanted to. I wasn't brought up that way. My jib is not so cut. No one's is. The only people that could be fakes would be people who specifically, or if you prefer, willfully do it. And if they did it, you could never catch them, because they would have transcended it. They would not now be a fake fake. They would be a real fake. And you can't spot a real fake. There's nothing to spot. If the real fake was in a good mood and you said, hey, what you just said to me, are you faking? Let's say for whatever reason that the real faker was in a good mood, you might say, yeah. You'd be left with nothing. You wouldn't be mad. You wouldn't be upset. It'd be like somebody has handed you a piece of information that you requested, or maybe you asked for something to eat. Hey, I've never had an eggplant. You hand it to them, and they take a bite, and it tastes like air. In other words, you could not catch a real fake, but even if he admitted it, or she admitted it, you'd have nothing. You'd feel like nothing happened. You'd leave, and within minutes, you'd forgot the whole thing occurred. That would be the only possible fake in the world. Now into the heart, if not more questionable parts of tonight's entertainment. Benefits of operating at the extremes. Part, whatever comes first. You people who majored in math. From one quite valid revolutionary view, it is most useful to operate at the extremes. To operate specifically at the extremes of the binary battlefield. Referring back to everyone's most popular World War, I know it was mine, was WW1, back when they were still fighting the trench wars that you had. Let's say that's a trench. You had a trench over here, and then you had a trench over here, right? Then they'd have barbed wire and stuff like that. Then you had the middle ground, known amongst those so involved as no man's land, but between the two opposing forces. And as was played out, I guess, for the last time in the horizontal world in World War I, the opposing factions sat there for weeks, months, years, and it was rather stable. Had side X, side Y, and then the middle ground. And they tried to sit here and shoot it out, the other side give up, whatever it was they thought they were doing, whatever it was that life made them think they were doing. Look at that as being the binary battleground. As always, there are only two possible sides. And of course, don't worry about that it was the Allies versus the Germans, not them again. But look at it simply as being two sides, which it takes for every good war. Without two sides, you got a real boring war, as many of you probably know. Such wars very seldom get network coverage. There is a specific revolutionary use of operating at the extremes of the binary world, the binary battlefield. And one way for me to attempt to express it is it helps. It sets up a more conducive atmosphere for one to escape from the middle ground. And the middle ground is indeed like a no man's land. It is a place of uncertainty, ambiguity, and ambivalence. That is specifically what it is. It's not an accident. It's not a mistake. Those three words, I caught up just about every tail end, every loose piece of lint and string in the whole three-dimensional ball of uncertainty, ambiguity, and ambivalence. Notwithstanding their partial overlapping, it takes care of all of it. That is the three-dimensional purposes, the uses of the battlefield, ordinarily. But what it does is it leaves you open to attack. An attack, I'll go ahead and put words on it. What's my choice? It opens you up for attack, accusation, doubt, and guilt. To stick with threes, has a nice rhythm to it. Let me give you a for instance. In any situation, here you are, and apparently you are open to accusation in the full spread of that word. Challenge, questioning about something that occurred in this situation and your possible part therein. Operating at the extremes, the revolutionary use of this, the specific use of it, in this case would be to either totally deny any responsibility. Now, as much as I talk, when I say totally, I fucking mean totally. It is you totally deny any responsibility, and that's the end of it. You won't even discuss it. Once you deny responsibility, if somebody comes up from the ruling powers, from the guards, if somebody comes up with a piece of apparent evidence, you won't even look at it. If they stick it in front of your eyes, it's as though they held up a comic book, a flyer from a grocery store. You absolutely deny any responsibility, or you totally, unconditionally accept it. After you accepted it, there'd be no excuses, there'd be no extenuating circumstances to describe, there'd be no continuing tale. To put it verbally, bluntly, it would be that you say, all right, the situation you have just pointed out, I'm responsible. You hear me? I am responsible, and that's it. And you wouldn't have any more to say. You would not say any more than you would in the first instance. You have closed the door, if you know how to do it, on you being accused, whether it apparently comes from external sources or whether it apparently comes from the unwashed masses, the populace in you, which is, after all, the same what? Thing. Thank you. But you have closed the door on any real accusation of you being in complicity with this. That is the deed under discussion. Now, if you did not take such an extreme position, you would be, as everyone is ordinarily, and as you have always been, you would be held binary captive. You would be held binarily responsible. And there you would stand on the middle ground, having no choice, filled with the big three: uncertainty, ambiguity, and the ever-popular ambivalence. But can you get a glimpse, before I try and rub it in deeper, that if you could specifically act like, remember the adjectives I used, or the adverbs of totally and completely, that you would totally deny any responsibility, and that's it. And in truth, if not in fact, or vice versa, you would never have any intercourse or commerce with this again. If you got caught with the feathers in your teeth, if you got caught with the jam on your chin, the money in your pocket, the shit on your feet, you totally deny any responsibility, and that's it. That is it. That's the end of the subject. Never will you accept any responsibility. Never will you even discuss it. You won't even bat an eye. Or you unconditionally, completely accept all responsibility. But in the same way, after you accept it, there's a period after it. Nothing else to discuss. You're not going to explain it away. You're not going to help other people explain it away. You just do it. You have transcended being held accountable for it. You cannot be accused of being a part of a fifth column activity, even. You cannot be held binarily captive by it. What you're doing is taking a specific action. And this leads up to something I'm going to try again that everyone has some problem with. Not because of your background and upbringing or your intelligence. It's because of the molecular structure of humanity. It is the reality, it is the moving around of molecules when it hears the word lying. And I have asked before, I didn't make it a specific task, but someday I will, is what is it about the word lying and what everyone is wired up in various ways, but in general, to believe that they perceive it to mean? What is it that life has used? What is it that life is after that makes this word lying so strong with people? Why is it that the reality, the perception, not the misconception, the perception of what lying is, its potential dangers, its many shadings of definition and perception from person to person, what is it that life is up to make humanity in general condemn it? Back to the point, the general area for the night. Lying. To take an extreme position, you have got to, now for the time being, for a few moments, I'm going ahead and call it lying, because that's what it will sound like to good old you. If good old you is nothing more than stolid old pettifogging noun you. But what is ordinarily referred to and thought of as lying is as impossible as it is for an ordinary person to be a fake. Lying is what life actually does with the people involved with the situation. For them then to try and explain it, which everyone does, to make any comment on it, as though they were a willful, specific participant in it. That is lying from the revolutionary viewpoint. That is lying. That life has done its deed, and then those involved, those that got deeded, those that got duded, those to which it was did, those apparently involved with it, they lie. If they say anything, they lie. To say, why did you do this? And the person says, well, they're lying. And from now on, it just gets worse from the revolutionary viewpoint. They are in the middle ground. They're out in no man's land, not through their own doing. And they're lying. Life makes everyone lie. That is lying. Now by a few people, by the real revolutionists attempting to take up a specific position, to act in a specific way rather than to drift along and just simply be you. You have, pardon my use of the word again, but you have escaped or you have transcended lying. What you are doing is not commenting upon what life made the people do. You are not commenting in deed and word on what you're doing in response to what life made everyone else do. It may have made you do it at the time. And you may not have realized that life just made me do this again until someone involved with it, or someone apparently involved with it, says, why did you do that? And then you realize, ooh, not because of their accusation. That may trigger it. That might remind you to do this or to think about it. Then is your chance to escape from it. It's never too late to escape. If it is, it's too late to escape. It is then that you would take an extreme position. But you would not be lying. But you would not be saying what you would ordinarily say. You would not explain away your position. You would not be ambivalent about your position. You would not be filled with ambiguity verbally in your explanation about how I was a participant in this, unwittingly as I may have been, unwillingly as I may have been. The real revolutionist, as soon as he realized that is always. To some degree, I am back in traffic, and traffic dictates where you step. I am back in the grid, I am back in the battlefield, and life just made me do this. I just did what I ordinarily do, and then it was pointed out to me. In some way it came to my attention. Then you take the extreme position. Let us say it was triggered, apparently, by an external source that someone says, I can't believe that you did that. And you wipe the jam from your mouth, and you say, I didn't have any damn part of it. And that's it. And they caught you there with your hand in it. Or else you say something to the effect. If they say, how could you have been a part of this? You say, I was not a part of it. I was the mastermind behind it. It was my doing. And then you close the subject. Now, one thing I want you to see from a quite routine, mundane, ordinary, run-of-the-mill view, you could say, well, that's lying. Even by my own description, that I just described this person that just got caught up with just doing things and suddenly realized that they weren't willfully, consciously doing what they were caught doing. And suddenly they go either, hey, I didn't even do that when I just insinuated, or I just stated they did, or else they say, well, I intended to do it, which I just pointed out they didn't. So from an ordinary view, you could say, well, now there's lying. But that's not lying. That is far beyond lying. Well, if you insist, it would be lying. It would be into the realm of a fake, which, as I point out, would be a real fake. So lying would be like true lying. But it is not lying. It's not even connected. Lying is what life does to people and then makes them talk about it. That's lying. It serves a purpose in a specific way that I now want to try and draw your attention to out in the no man's land. You can only, if you're ordinary, you can and would only ever explain yourself conditionally, deny guilt, responsibility, or to conditionally accept some of the blame. You can only do that when you're operating in the middle ground. That is where you are supposed to be. You're not supposed to be at the extremes. It is only out in the middle ground that a person can stay adequately agitated. It is only out in the middle ground that you can, as you should, fruitfully experience those three great feelings of uncertainty, ambiguity, and ambivalence. A real revolutionist, however, would see it another way. Let me further point out, I can make this, I believe, a little verbally more distinct. It is in the middle ground that I'm describing being beset, if not supported by those three great pillars of Western and Eastern thought and experience of uncertainty, ambiguity, and ambivalence. That is the norm. You all understood that, right? You didn't look at it as being some deviation from the middle ground of the human flow of events and people. It is the norm. The norm is out in no man's land. The norm is where everyone is supposed to feel, to varying degrees, uncertainty, ambiguity, and ambivalence. You don't know whether you're responsible or not. You don't know whether you should take a little responsibility, no responsibility. But then again, everybody has a little responsibility. After all, didn't we all, each of us, help kill Jesus Christ? Or John F. Kennedy, or Super Sales? Or didn't we all play some small part in letting Albania close up their borders? All that sort of thing. That is the norm. A real revolutionist, remember, will either deny any responsibility or else he'd take it all. The way they laughed and treated Buddha, yeah, that's the one that put him up to it. Assuming that would fly, they'd fly somewhere, I guess. I'd find a group of leaves and carnation milk, or what do you call it? Reincarnated milk. Or else when they said it's you and I that let the evil happen in the world. It's you and I, by not speaking up and taking some action, you'd say, hold it right there, Charlie. I don't even believe in evil. And whatever you describe as evil, I don't give a rat's ass what anybody does. Don't ever mention it to me again, because I'm not responsible for anything unless I tell you I am. That would be the real revolutionist's attitude. It would be a specific act. It is certainly not normal. It is certainly not mechanical to the person. At the ordinary level, what I started to point out was, ordinary consciousness sees binary extremes as being dangers, as being ills to be treated. For instance, if you had a person who was extremely, perhaps the wrong choice of words, excruciatingly fastidious about their appearance, and on the other hand you had a person apparently a slob, a person apparently sans any concern about their physical appearance. From all ordinary views, when you fall into either of those kind of extremes, just to use my example, people are judged to be sick, neurotic, but definitely sick. I'm talking about the real extreme, somebody that just constantly is talking about, fidgeting with, looking for mirrors, just an absolute idée fixe about their appearance. There's probably some psychological name for it. But then on the other hand, you find someone that apparently just gives no thought whatsoever to their appearance. And they might have seemingly be relatively normal in other ways, but if this person never bathed, never shaved, never combed their hair, just wore rags, I don't have to make a sermon out of this. You do understand from the good old bourgeoisie view of the populace, from the middle of life's body, from the middle of humanity, such extremes, white people living at such extremes are judged to be ill, if not dangerous, and they need to be treated. You should find that interesting. It is only, if you looked at the extremes like here as being the trenches, it is only out here in no man's land, well, out in the middle ground. It is there that ordinary consciousness finds the norm to reside. But now watch it, of course, when I'm talking about someone who is excruciatingly fastidious about their appearance, and withal someone apparently who gives not a rat's ass about their appearance. We're talking about just what happened to them. They are just being them. Those two extremes are looked at as being dangers because the people are not properly subject to what? Apparently, uncertainty, ambiguity, ambivalence. My first example of the person who is neurotically concerned, as I guess I would call it, about their appearance, there's no uncertainty. The person would say, listen, there's nothing as important as one's looks. And I don't know anybody in the world as ugly as I am. I'm either too fat, I'm too thin, I'm too short. Well, all of you got enough of your own voices and your own inner states in your own country to know about that. The person has no uncertainty. They have no ambivalence about it. But then on the other hand, if we take my proverbial archetypical slob, and you got the person to respond about, why do you look like this? They just say, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. No uncertainty. They're not ambivalent about it. You can't get them excited at all to say, listen, you'd get along a lot better in life if you'd clean up. The person apparently doesn't care. Might say, well, I'm getting along fine. I'd get along fine if you'd leave me alone. You might get somewhere in life if you would take a bath. And they might say, I don't want to go anywhere. I especially don't want to go anywhere with people that worry about whether I take a bath. No ambivalence. They might conclude this philosophical discussion by simply reminding you of that time-honored fact of mind your own fucking business. They are operating at what would amount to mechanical extremes. But ordinary consciousness, back where I started this paragraph, looks upon extremes on the binary playing field as being dangerous and being, in fact, ills to be treated. Now, don't forget that. Now, try to put that together with the fact, did I stay on that long enough? Did I even three-dimensionally, logically prove that to you? Or did it strike you as being, yeah, that's true? Maybe I didn't. Think about any neuroses, any phobia, any degree that you've ever read about, heard about, imagined, made up yourself, of someone who had an emotional problem, a psychological quirk. You can look at it in a particular way. Fear of closed spaces, fear of great open spaces, fear of heights, fear of lows. You can look at all of these, everything within the realm, the literature of psychology and psychiatry and religion. You can look at all as when it's judged as being ill or being dangerous or being self-destructive. You can see that it fits in what I'm describing is that they're operating in that one area at an absolute extreme. That the prevailing middle-of-the-road, middle-class wisdom now in life's body manifested by man would be such as, let's take fear of heights. They say, all right, everybody has some legitimate fear of heights. You're up on a ladder and it begins to shake. You're an idiot not to have some fear. But it's a neuroses. It's self-defeating. It is not helping protect your organism, the body itself. If you're the kind of person who can put on platform shoes back in the 60s and suddenly fear for your life and scream for the fire department, you know, that's self-defeating. But all they're describing is an extreme of some form of behavior or belief. So all so-called psychological and even spiritual ills could be described as a mechanical positioning wherein one finds oneself at an extreme. But now try, did I prove it to everybody? Right, all right. But now, in that great three-dimensional world, stick that right back on with this, that it's in that same area, only that area, that is adjudicated and judged to be the norm. It is only here where there is some degree of uncertainty, ambiguity, and ambivalence. If it's not, you are, if not neurotic, you're probably psychotic. I love to put it in reverse and then find out I didn't go anywhere with you people. Ordinary consciousness, as in many, 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 many other cases, has it both ways. Oh, all right. We'll turn the damn tape over. Now that you had that refreshing break to see that life demands both, now let's press into the area of the real revolutionist. The real revolutionist would find the most dangerous area in the world to be the middle ground. No man's land, because you'll get shot at from both sides, for one reason. And it is the one area wherein you will be judged to be normal, wherein if you're normal, if you're wired up to be fairly normal to start with, then it's only there that you feel like I'm in a normal place. That is, I'm disturbed, I'm uncertain, I'm ambiguitized, and I'm ambivalent. I am normal. The real revolutionist would see that to be the most dangerous piece of territory in the three-dimensional world. He would see that he is surrounded in the 3D world, that is, from trenches on either side. And there's only two sides, as you know, on a binary battlefield, that he is surrounded by people apparently the enemy, and he does not belong to either camp. And when he steps out there, he gets shot from both sides. He gets shot at, and remember, we're not talking about now Germans and French. Plug in any name you want to. How about good old, I got it. Let's call the opposing armies good and evil. How about that? And we'll use Your Father's Barn, and we'll offer it on a show. Well, let's call it good and evil. The real revolutionist knows that out there he will get shot at by both sides. Now, ordinary consciousness, an ordinary person finds nothing wrong with that. It is a fairly common verbal strain running throughout religious and would-be religious literature for 2,000 or 3,000 years, that man is a battlefield upon which the forces of good and evil are playing out their tiring game, their dangerous game, the struggle between the gods and the anti-gods. And the spoils are the men and women. The real revolutionist sees that everyone, except for those mechanically caught at some extreme, such as my fastidious dresser and my slob, that everyone else is living out their life there to varying degrees. If we say right in the middle would be the height of uncertainty, ambiguity, and ambivalence. Then a little over this way would be a little less, and all sorts of permeations and possible combinations until you got over to mechanical absolute extremes. The real revolutionist would simply see that he and everyone else under ordinary conditions feels as though one side of the battlefield at any given time is safer than another. That if we had to pick a very crude example right quick, and even taking the 3D world and almost bring it down to a 2D world, if you had a man over here who was a Muslim, a man who was an Arab, and he looked over and in his way he thought, hey, one side of the people over here are Muslims, then he would mechanically feel a little bit safer over there. He would feel a little less uncertain. He would feel a little more like, I may be closer to home, or they may not hurt me as bad. The real revolutionist would understand that out there in the battlefield, whether you're there or you're over here, the real revolutionist understands I'm getting shot at by both sides. They don't realize it, and it only happens with a few people. The real revolutionist at our time and place, that is you people, when you begin to see this, in fact, the only thing you'll know for certain is that you and me are liable to get shot. You'll suspect that most of the others here are the same way, but you recognize everyone else believes they're being shot at by one side predominantly. But you realize, based on my position, based on what I understand, based upon me now, trying to become a revolutionist, I'm going to get shot by both sides. I'm going to get shot at. And they don't know it. You can't describe it to them. There's no reasoning with them. It cannot be changed. The real revolutionist is always walking out in the midst of the battlefield in no man's land in a certain way. That is, he is always subject to being shot at by either side. So here, to use my map update for this evening, what the real revolutionist would attempt to do from a particular view is to get the fuck out of the middle ground. He would, in fact, not only flee to one of the trenches willfully, specifically, which no one else does, remember. Anybody else that found themselves in the trenches would be judged to be sick. That is, they would mechanically be living at the fringes of the battle. Neurotically inclined to wash their hands and change clothes every 5 minutes. Neurotically believing that God hates them. Neurotically believing that God talks to them. Other than those that would be over here, and they would be incapacitated, they're crippled. They're not in the mainstream of the battle. But other than those, the only person that you would see trying to get there, the only person trying to get there would be the would-be revolutionist. Not only would he be trying to, God hates them, neurotically believing that God talks to them. Other than those that would be over here, and they would be incapacitated, they're crippled. They're not in the mainstream of the battle. But other than those, the only person that you would see trying to get there, the only person trying to get there would be the would-be revolutionist. Not only would he be trying to get there, he would, in fact, try and dig a new, deeper trench even further back, if for no other reason than to stay away from the cripples, to stay away from those babbling nonsense. And plus, a real revolutionist might like some time by himself, for all I know. But he would definitely, he or she definitely would see no man's land, the middle ground, the very things praised by Buddha, the things praised by Muhammad, by Jesus, by philosophers, moderation, middle of the road, being decent, not being a fanatic about anything. He sees middle of the road as far as he's concerned then. We're talking about a different level now. Talking about being able to see the three-dimensional world as being simply a disjointed reflection of a greater four-dimensional loop. He sees the middle ground where everyone else sees normality. He sees it as the most dangerous place he could be right then, because he will unknowingly, that is by those forces involved, he is unknowingly being shot at by both sides. And it doesn't matter what names, what verbs, what nouns you plug in that seem to be the prevailing forces at that time on your battlefield. If you're out there willfully, if you're out there knowingly, you're going to get shot at by both sides. They're not shooting at you necessarily, but you're going to get shot by both sides, wherein an ordinary person, ordinary consciousness, playing out their role that they are more attuned to some degree, one side or the other, they only see hostile bullets coming from one direction. Just because somebody over here gets shot by one of their own people, at least, you know, they didn't mean to be shot. They only see hostile bullets being able to go in one direction. People over here only see hostile bullets as coming this way, from east to west. Any bullets going from west to east are good bullets. Any attack that's going from here that way is justified. It's in the God's will. It's in their plan. The real revolutionist sees that either side could kill me. Either side is going to continually do me damage. All I got to do is be hit by a bullet from this side, and very likely, I'll fall back into good old red systems reaction, which is to be expected if I got shot. And it's also very expected, knowing me as well as I do, that I'm probably going to get, let me say, pissed at those people for doing it. So even if it's not a mortal shot, I'm going to be mad. Who knows for how long? What if I can't walk for a month? I may stay mad at those fuckers for a month. I may hold it against them forever. I got no business being out here. I should be in an extreme position. An extreme position would be, let me give you an example. If there is a situation and you are accused, challenged, questioned about your possible participation, and you do one of these two things. You either totally deny any responsibility or you completely accept all responsibility. You specifically do it, and it doesn't really matter which. According to the circumstance and who you are, it does matter which, but if you got enough sense to do this, you'd have enough sense to figure out which one to do. There's a kind of corollary to this, so let me point out. The real revolutionist would always be prepared to declare that he either does not believe at all in accidents. Accidents, I use the word to embrace anything that you find related to accidents. He would be prepared to absolutely deny that he believes in any way whatsoever in accidents, or he would be equally prepared to proclaim that he believes, absolutely believes, that the whole affair, all of it, is by chance. To specifically, it does not have to simply be, it does not have to be only overtly. Inside of your own apparent battlefield, inside these apparent skirmishes and struggles going on in this great partnership, in the boardroom of your human corporation. None of you people are wired up to mechanically be that extreme. And so there is room within the internal apparent dialogue, discussion, debate, the inner ambiguities and uncertainties inherent in all people, that there is room for a reasonable discussion. There's room for some voice in you to say, well, sometimes when I was younger, I really believed in gods and stuff like that there was some purpose. But now sometimes, I don't know, I look out and I think, oh, this whole thing's an accident. But then it's like the voice of my father or my grandmother saying, tut, tut. Don't you go off and get an education and become an agnostic. You know that there's a God somewhere. Look at the flowers and hummingbirds. This couldn't be an accident. And I think, yeah, you're right. Plus, why take a risk being an agnostic? Who knows what's going to happen after you buy the farm? You are back being normal. You're in the middle of the battlefield. You're in the middle of the road. You're in the most dangerous place if you are now attempting to be a real revolutionist. You're in the most dangerous area, the most dangerous plot of ground on this planet. And that's, of course, plot of ground is not only out there, it's in here. And the voices are prepared to discuss, to debate in a reasonable way whether this all might be an accident or otherwise. But the real revolutionist would be prepared, would understand that the day may come. It may come every other minute for a while, for me to internally take a specific acting position that I am ready to absolutely declare to one and all, to all of me and to anybody else that, for whatever reasons, makes me speak up, that this whole thing is an accident. This whole thing is just by chance, or else to as equally, passionately declare, with no reservations, that there are no accidents. None. It is taking up the willful, specific safety of an extreme, specific position in the binary world. You have to, of course, simultaneously, you have to pass for being normal. Or else you see you get in, if you can listen right quick, you start getting into real three-dimensional cobwebs. Because while not being normal, you have got to specifically pass for being normal. You have got to be able to take up extreme positions, and you can look at this either way you want to. Take up an extreme position, and people either do not notice it, or they do notice it, and they don't care. And under don't care, you can look at that several ways. They don't know what to do about it. It frightens them. They hear it for a second and forget it. It does not gel the kind of expression you're making that would normally only be coming from a mechanically produced extreme position, coming from you, and there's some sense, you couldn't be faking it, but there's some kind of sense that you're not dangerous, wherein everything that you are proclaiming is extreme to the point that ordinarily would be looked at as being dangerous, as being an ill. And yet it can come out of you. As I said, I gave you 2 or 3 choices, and people hear it and they're not frightened, which they should be, or they hear it and they don't believe they heard what they heard, or they hear it and they go, oh, and they forget it. So while everyone else is attempting to pass for normal, they are normal. They have a very good view of what their life really is. They're trying to pass for normal, and they are normal. They worry about being normal, and there's nothing to worry about. The real revolutionist, worry doesn't begin to cover it. That is a short sheet to his bed. Worry about being normal is nothing. Being normal is way beyond habit. Being normal is a custom. And a real revolutionist cannot become a victim of custom. He cannot become a victim of habit. That's why even out in the external world, when we start talking about the little silly parts of revolutions, real revolutionists do not stay in Sheratons They do not take up suites or rooms. You all know that. You've read enough history. Real revolutionists do what? They get real cheap clothes, shoes that may or may not fit, and they go out and they live in the bushes while they're revolutioning. It's the only way you can do it. You can't be a revolutionist and call it in. You can't be in the penthouse at the local Hilton. You cannot be wearing nice clothes. You cannot be seen down from room service to send up eclairs and bullets. The real revolutionist has got to create crises. He has got to create irritation. And he's got to do it while appearing to be normal, while everyone else is appearing to be normal. And the worst part of it is they are. And even some of them are worse, because some of them appear to be normal and worry about whether they are or they're not, and they too are what? Yes. That is the sort of weights against which one must push, or against which one must pull. It's according to whether you are part of the great division of humanity again into those who believe that you can push a car up a hill with a rope, or those who would rather stay home and see if anything ever comes on television. It's one or the other. Another little interesting twist, a little spin that life does, let me point out. A particular way that it puts a spin on a manifestation inside this general area that I'm trying to update for you, and it's this: that the more outlandish, the more extreme appears to be the trappings of something, the more conservative it's going to be. Oh, let's see. How about I'll start off the Catholic Church. Now plug in any religion you want to. I guess a close second would be the Greek Orthodox. Just think a second. Just try. If you're down in an impartial trench and you first look up and you see the Pope and you see all these people dressed up, or you see, don't leave out Jews and Muslims, but think about the Catholic Church is always the first one that comes to mind. All of this outlandish thing going on, and what could be more of a pillar of the bourgeoisie of life now? What could be more of the norm? What does the church preach, by and large? If you get into any areas, the question arises of radical attitudes. The Pope on down is, hey, chill out. And that was the latest encyclical. I remember, of course, they presented it in Latin, but that's the last one that came from the Pope, was known as the chill out canon, or whatever it was. Mind your P's and Q's. Strive for a better life over in some little country, wherever you are. But don't pick up guns. Don't be radicals. Don't talk about crap like that, in fact, in church. Put on your funny costumes, or if you don't have any, come watch us, and we'll do all these outlandish things. Just look at it. When I say outlandish, you know I'm not picking on the Catholic Church or any religion, but compared to everyday life, compared to you and I, you walk in and you look, not just the Pope, but all these men in robes and dresses, and they're waving candles and smoke, and they're turning around in circles. Just stand there and look at it, compared to you or people working at McDonald's or working on your car. You look at that, and what could be on the face of this earth more outlandish? You're just used to it. But what could be more right now conservative? The more outlandish, the more extreme appears to be the trappings of a phenomenon, of a dynamic, of a thing, be it noun or verb, apparently going on now, the more conservative it's going to be. You don't find that to be an interesting spin that life is done again? And you're used to it. But you are not going, you surely hear the validity of this, you are not now going to walk in to a Catholic church, a Greek Orthodox, into a temple, into any mainstream religion and hear anything that's going to feel like that you're being fired upon from a trench. All you're going to hear is the expected. All you're going to hear is the predictable. You know exactly what it is. It doesn't have to be your religion. But there's not going to be anything outlandish or extreme going on there. Only the trappings. And the more outlandish and extreme are the trappings, the more middle of the road it's going to be. Another, oh my God, not corollary, I'll throw out an unspent shell in passing, also, or even withal, at certain times and certain places, that which appears to be the most routine and conservative can be the most dangerous. Jimmy Swaggart, a Mussolini when he started, a Hitler, people that seem to be in the mainstream, people wearing suits, not wearing funny hats, not claiming any kind of extraterrestrial powers. Just a person comes out and says, my friends, we have a few problems I'd like to talk to you about. And they become, from that same view, they become ultimately, for some small length of time, out on this great battlefield, they become the most outlandish and the extreme. But all you've got to do is look around at your contemporaneous time, and that, whatever activity it is, and the apparent people involved, the more outlandish and extreme are the trappings, the rituals, all the trappings, the more, in the middle of the battlefield, the more normal it's going to be, the more conservative it's going to be. I just thought some of you might find that, again, interesting that life does such things as that. Anybody that believes that life does not have a sense of humor. That's no proof. I don't know why I say that. That doesn't prove life has a sense of humor, does it? If it does, and to some degree you're the punchline, so let's don't dwell on it. All right. Now in conclusion. Since I know all of you have a continuing feeling that you'd like to do more, now when I come up with little things for you to do, if it's tasks for the whole group or things I give some of you specifically, all of you feel as though you would like for me to do it more, you wish you could do it more, and etc. I've been talking and sketching all around the edges of this. I want to give you a real something to use. To use, not just to talk about. And it's just something, as always, I shouldn't have to prove this. I shouldn't even have to guarantee it or validate it, but I'm telling you this can be used. There is a continuing use. I never use me as an example, but if I were going to use me for an example, I could say that, boy, I've made great use of this. I'm not saying that, because I don't say shit like that. But if I did, I could say that about this. Seriously, I'm not saying that. It's not a trick. I'm not saying that, but if I did, I'm just trying to impress upon you before I start. It's the preface to this song and dance. Now, I never talk about faith. Nobody expects me to if you've been getting these tapes, even you and newer people, for any length of time. We don't talk about faith in me. We don't talk about faith in a book since we don't have a Veda Mecum. We don't talk about faith in a founder since we don't have one other than moi. And I'm not the cornerstone of anybody's damn church. We don't have anything to have faith in. I don't talk about faith. I don't talk about belief. I don't talk about what might happen at some other future time, if there was a future time sometime in the future, and there was time. And like that. Well, you get the picture. But we draw nigh to a reality on another level, and I'm going to call it this tool. It's a verbal description of a verb tool, not a noun tool, but it's a process. And I'm going to call it OD. For operational directive. Plus, I guess those of you interested in things medical know that that stands for overdose, which may or may not fit in everything. Sad to say, but when you live in a world compared to the 3D one, when you live in a world of says, everything finally fits together. Everything finally runs together. Operational directives, and I'm going to give an example, are the sorts of things that along the way, periodically I'll say, hey, you ought to write this down as your dictum for the week. Or what I'm about to describe, hey, you ought to get you a washable tattoo and put it on your little chest or your forearm for the next week or so. It should be your words to live by. That's about all I've ever done. On top of that, many of you by yourself, you make a note, either on paper or mentally, there's something, the way I said it, the time, the humidity, the dew point, everything was just right, and it struck you as that is words to live by right there. I got to remember that. When it strikes you that way, it's not because of any show on your part of faith. It's not because I say, hey, have faith in what I'm about to tell you. But it strikes you for whatever reason. And I don't mean to cloak that in some unknown shroud that I don't understand. Let's just leave it at everything is wired up. That at that particular time it strikes you as having great, great validity. Nothing to discuss, just to you. Non-verbally, it just pours all over you that that's a fact, Jack. And if I could remember that, if I could use that, it would be of real benefit. Nobody has to tell me. Just as though an unseen hand had reached out of a trench somewhere and grabbed you, and you went, yeah, and you write. You have something to write on, or you tell yourself, I got to remember this. I got to remember this. That would, if I had been using such a term and using this or trying to describe this short method to you, not describe this short method to you, to give this short description of the method. We must be specific here. That's very, very important, as all of you know, is to keep our rucks in a dough. If I had been using such terms, then these times that you feel as though you had been shook and that something struck you beyond any verbalization, beyond any room for doubt or discussion, that this is a fact, as irreverent, as illogical, as unreasonable as it may have sounded to 2- and 3-dimensional ears, it's simply a fact, and I should use it. Then at that time, I could have been calling those ODs. Now here's what I want to describe. If all of you will listen, I don't think that you will verbally have any problem hearing what I'm saying. Let me make up or fit in an idea and call it an OD for tonight, an operational directive. That is, that there is no such thing among the few, among a real revolutionist, as any criticism. That it is not a valid, it is not an acceptable feeling, thought, emotional, energetic, molecular flow through you. Let us say, which it doesn't do every time, or at any given time it doesn't hit all of you, that struck you at one time as yes. But let's say that now I tell you that. And if I said, from now on I'm going to give an OD once a week, which I'm not saying I'm going to do that, but let us say that I said that, and I said that's the one for the week. And we're starting now a new level of responsibility. And I'm telling you from henceforth, starting right now, you have got to not only think about acting in that way, you have got to act in that way. That I'm telling you that is the most important thing that I have to say tonight, and that is this week's operational directive. It's got to go inside of your listing of operational directives, and from now on, you've got to live accordingly. All right, no one can. No one can start immediately. But here is what the tool is. That either it struck you as being valid, beyond questionable, being true, and it should be used. Either that, or at the particular time I say it, I just insist that this is true. And if I get any impression that you're not struggling with this, you're yesterday's news. I'm just going to start putting people out week by week. All I got to do is just have any suspicion. There's no discussion. It doesn't have to be proven to me. I'm not going to talk to you about it. I'm just going to say out. Don't come back. Whichever way you'd like to look at right now that would apparently encourage you to pursue this. That apparently you understand some validity, some meaning to it, or else you just do it because I threatened you. Or a combination, I threatened or I insisted that what I'm describing is proper. Here's what it would be. We're still assuming in either case that you don't have a full understanding of it. If you did, you wouldn't even need me to tell you. We don't have to discuss, and it is an operational directive. That is, it is not an absolute truth. It's not a truth forever, because once you understand the reality of it, you can forget about it. Which is a nice way of saying the reality. When you understand it, you do forget about it. But here's the way it would operate. So I'm saying it's simple enough that you can all hear it. But just because I'm describing this simply, a lot of you have been right around the edges of this. Some of you have already played with this, but I'm telling you this is the way to do it right now. That we say, or I'm saying that the operational directive for this week is, you cannot tolerate any form of criticism in you. Laughing at somebody's hobby, laughing at the way somebody looks, just a sneer. Just this fleeting thought that there you are out doing your jogging for the day and somebody goes by and they got a car and loud music's coming out and the car, all around the back windshield, it says Chevrolet. And everything right up into you is a kind of a laugh. It's kind of a sneer. It can happen just like that, of the kind of cheap motherfuckers driving around with cars like that, and then they got the nerve to go spend money to put Chevrolet in the window. Are they so dumb that they figure that they can't remember what kind of car they got? Are they so dumb in low class that they think by saying Chevrolet in the window that I'm going to be impressed? Moi? They got to play music so loud, what do they expect is going to happen? That women walking down the street's going to go, wow, that guy listens to station so-and-so. I think I'll fuck him. Hey, come back. Just the whole scenario, that kind of trash, that kind of ordinary routine, somewhere in all of that. There you are, walking, jogging, staying on a street corner, a piece of life goes by, and this form of criticism just, it begins to sneer. You feel it. You've been through enough just with the task I've given. If you've got any kind of memory that begins to strain at the gravitational pull of three-dimensional memory, that you can spot such as this. Not just my lengthy verbal description that took me to go through that thing about the loud car, the music, and the Chevrolet on it. It may be so fast, and you may catch it so fast, that you can't really describe anything. You just know, here comes the old refrain of criticism. I'm back working for life's paper. It was just a sneer, just a... And you remember that you cannot do that, and you simply refuse to tolerate it, and you stop it right then. But now I'm still presenting it to you on the basis that really you don't understand the ramifications of it. It's just that I have presented this, and you accepted it, that this is an operational directive until further notice being when I understand it. That is, when I can forget about it, when I have forgotten about it. And the directive is, I will not tolerate that. I don't understand why, but I will not. But this is not faith. I'm not doing it because he said so. The way so-called faith works in the ordinary world is people attempt to do that, and the means itself apparently is the end. I don't understand it. But the priest, the rabbi, the holy person said, it's not for us to understand. It's written down in our holy text. Our great founder, our great teacher, the gods have spoken to someone sometime. They said, hey, you people down there, don't do that. I know it's beyond your comprehension. I know we made you to where you want to, but don't do it. We can't understand it. That's not it. That is a closer description of what ordinary faith is. I'm telling you, you have some feeling, even if it's just me saying, by God, do it, or I'll throw your fucking ass out. Do it because this is extremely important, and it is useful. And there you are, to use my continuing example, here it is, the split second of the energy flowing, the chemicals, the electrical energy. The molecules are bringing about the reality hidden behind the word criticism. And there it is, and you refuse to do it, and we're still, I'm describing the basis, to let's say that you don't have the least idea why this is true. Because I tell you it's not moralistic, it's not religious, I'm telling you it is scientific. I'm telling you can't do it if you want to actually create a revolution, if you want to change before you die, if you want to change the molecular structure that you think is you, if you want to change it from a white, at least into a semi-white, then I'd say you cannot do this. That you take it as being the tool that I refuse to do it. I don't understand why, but I'm not going to do it. That, as simplistically as it sounds, is even a bigger secret than the one that I periodically pull up for you, of those that can, once they hear it, understand the revolutionary nature of having it described and realize that, hey, I can't stop thought, but I can either think about this or I can think about that as long as I keep my eye on it. Hey, I can quit believing that fried eggs are going to jump out from under the bed when they turn out the lights and eat me. I haven't had a good night's sleep in 32 years, worried about that. But now that you pointed out, hey, I can think of hot cross buns instead of fried eggs. And hot cross buns, I don't know, I can handle hot cross buns. More revolutionary than that, once you can hear it, is to operate on the basis that there are things that strike you, regardless of whether I ever started handing out weekly or periodic ODs, things that strike you, such as you cannot be angry, which is just another view of being a critic, is you cannot be mad at people. For whatever reason, you can't be mad at people because they're stupid. You can't be vexed by anything. You just can't. And it takes an extraordinary amount of molecular change in a person to start to get close to that. But until you can get close to it, until you can make some move, would be to operate on the basis that it distracts you. If I don't insist on it myself, but it strikes you that that's true. That's true. I don't care what religion said it. I don't care what so-called holy man said it. I know it's true. Something just moves down to the marrows of my bones and my own little molecules and tells me you cannot be mad at people and do anything extraordinary. I don't care what it is. I don't care how they look, what my parents said about that group of people, what the world says about that type of person, what my own molecules seem to say about that kind of behavior. You can't be mad at that and expect to move. You can't be mad at that. You can't expend energy on that and ever become a revolutionist. It distracts you. It's a fact. I don't understand it. I can't do it. To use this OD method is you simply refuse to tolerate it. I don't understand why, but I know I shouldn't, and you don't. That's it. If you wait until you, quote, understand what the hell's going on before you really commit yourself to something, Jesus H. Christ, are you going to be waiting? You're going to be hanging around my grave if I let them bury me. You'll be coming out with flowers and a tape recorder, big old wistful eyes, waiting for messages, waiting for that flying train to come get you and to take you home. You cannot wait until you in some way fully understand what's going on before I totally commit myself. That is the norm. Some unusual area of agitation in your own molecular structure, the way that you were fitted out and wired up in this life, brought you into orbit with me in this. There is nothing further to commit yourself. There is no other step to take. It's a matter of degree now whether you're going to do anything with that kind of magnetic attraction you already had. Are you going to sit around and wait until suddenly there's going to be some kind of blinding flash of consciousness and that you'll understand everything I understand, assuming I understand anything? That you'll get the BP, the big picture. Now get it all in this suddenly, in a flash of enlightenment. Oh, it might take over a weekend, but in this flash of enlightenment, things will, besides the BP, the big picture, but in this flash, things will sort themselves out. And I'll be able to sit down more or less at my leisure, and I'll go, now I see. Now I understand the spiritual dimensions and ramifications of not hating people. Oh, yes. And I understand now why one should not be so foolish as to criticize the behavior of others. Now I understand it. Yes, yes. Well, bless your little heart. If you don't take some action, whether I'm making you do something, whether I tell you to go off and lose 10 pounds, or if I tell you to go out and gain 2 inches on your arms and chest, or if I tell you to go out and take 2/4 of, God forbid, economics, or if I tell you to go out and double the amount you're running, if you cannot begin to feel that you have got to take some continual action on your own part, then notwithstanding all my proclamations that this will never become a church and this is not to create followers, boy, was I fooled. You mean to say that I cannot even recognize a good old fait accompli when I am surrounded by one? This kind of occupational or operational directive of using this kind of method, that there's some things, and you should enumerate them, don't hesitate. I just picked out some of the obvious ones, or 2 of the obvious, that I know you cannot do this. There's no reason why. I don't have to prove it. It's not compared or based on any religion or anything. I know you cannot hate people. I know this. I'm not an idiot. I know that I'm wired up. I hate all kinds of people. And I'm not all that particular. I mean, I don't just hate people because any particular group, because real stringently because of their color or these people's religion. Just in general, I don't particularly care for anybody. I mean, everybody by and large rubs me the wrong way, just being here, just being alive. My general attitude, if the truth was known, is just more or less, on an acceptable level, is fuck everybody. But everything in me that's not wired up to that, that is, obviously everything in me that's left that brought me here, that created my interest in this, the one part of me that at times does not feel or does not taste like my foot when it's asleep, it's not a part that feels like it's the beginning of terminal ennui. That one part, without any discussion, without any reference to holy books or religions, understands that you cannot do that, you cannot feel that way, even though I feel that way. And I know enough that I got nobody to blame it on. It wasn't my parents' fault, it's nobody's fault. That is who I am, and I just drift along. That is me. That's me, damn it. It is me, me, me. It is me, the noun. That is the part I play to a good degree in life's body. That somewhere in life's body it needs a bunch of humans that by and large find other humans pretty irritating. Maybe not an extreme case of being a misanthrope, but if I had to express my general attitude toward everybody else, mostly it's, get out of my way. Leave me the fuck alone. And I know I cannot do that as natural as it is to me. It's as natural as me getting up, as natural as me breathing, as natural as me looking around at somebody. That's my general attitude. I don't wish you any will, but stay away from me. Don't talk to me. Don't bother. I just stay the hell away. I understand. I cannot do that and do whatever this is, even if I don't know exactly what this is. And I don't really know, I don't really understand why you can't do that. It's so natural. And I'm in good company. All of my parents, most of my relatives feel the same way. Most of the people that I call my friends are the same way. That's why I don't see them very often. We can't, even my friends, we don't like each other. But I do know this. I don't understand, but I know I cannot do that and change. I know I can't do that and understand anymore. I know I can't do that and get freed from this orbit. then you have got to absolutely refuse to tolerate it. You just got to turn away from it. You got to be able, which with many of you by now is not the problem. As soon as you feel it, that energy has struck me, here it is again, and you can't do it. It's not on the basis I understand, it's not on the basis I can talk about it. I'm not going to debate it. I'm not going to get out there in the middle of the field. I'm not going to do that. I can't do it, and you simply don't. I don't care if you have to think about hot cross buns. But I am not going to be mad. I am not going to be a critic. I'm not going to be me. Not right this second. And I can stop it. I can stop it right now, and I can keep it stopped for a few seconds. I can at least keep it stopped for a few seconds until good old me gets caught up and distracted and then get on something else. At least I can stop this right now. I can specifically stop it. I can do it. I can just turn my head. I can just do it on the basis I know I can't do it. I can't tolerate it. This whole thing of using a kind of operational directive, and I say it's not faith. December last week, we spent a great deal of time talking about not talking about shutting the fuck up, and etc. It is not, when we bring out such as that and saying it was a very practical, everyday nature, it's not on the basis of you actually shutting the fuck up and suddenly going around trying to do some kind of imitation of the strong, silent type, refusing to talk to your mother and father and husband and wife. It's an understanding of what's behind that description. It's an understanding of the reality of being able to shut up and nobody know it. That is also the reality behind what I am referring to as these operational directives. It's not the thing itself. It's ultimately the understanding of it. But you cannot wait for that. If you're going to wait for that, none of you would have needed this. You wouldn't have needed me. You wouldn't have been looking for anything. You'd read a book. You could have picked up almost any book. The Old Testament, the New Testament, sayings of Buddha, the Quran, Thomas, anybody, just about. And you'd have read somewhere it said, hey, chill out. And you went, hey, that's it. I got it. That'd have been it. But that wasn't it, was it? No. It is the understanding. It is not a rule of some kind. There is no permanent rule that you should shut up. But until you understand it, there should be a rule to shut the fuck up. That if you understand anything, you're talking too much already. To say that you shouldn't dislike people. You shouldn't be a critic. It's not that someday you can dislike people and can be a critic. That's not it. But to say, well, that's some kind of rule. That's some kind of absolute law. That's only true in the three-dimensional world. So it's not the rule itself. It is not some forced act. It is not the specific intent to imitate something. That is the method to do it. That is a means to approach it. It is ultimately the understanding of it. So it's not that everybody, for instance, should quit talking, although you should. But you got to understand what's involved, and then you can shut up, and nobody knows it. Nobody's disturbed by it. Nobody's frightened. It is a danger. If it was recognized by people in the trenches, people out in the middle of the battlefield with you, they would find it dangerous, questionable, weird. What are you up to? So it's not the thing itself as can be described by me or anybody else in the three-dimensional world. It's the understanding behind it. That is what you'd be attempting with this method. If I was calling the operational directive, that there are things I know I can't do, and stop it. Refuse to do it, absolutely refuse to do it. Absolutely refuse to act or to think about acting in accord with it. All of you know enough. I don't have to. I may do it sometime. I may start next week. For me to start handing out weekly ODs. And suddenly we'd have not the 10 commandments. Every year we'd have 52 commandments. Of course, some of you might get smart enough and go home and really run through your computer and figure out, hey, it ain't 52 different ones. Boy, would I be chagrined to be caught. I'm going to stop